devotee, the course of my travels, in a joking way, he said, there's being on time, there's India Standard Time and there's American time. And he said, in the corporate world, when there's a time to begin something, you're expected, it's part of the culture, to be there 10 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes ahead of time, so that you're not late. So we're 7 minutes ahead of time, we're going to start. This morning session and the evening session are celebrated as Dhruva Stuti, the prayers of Dhruva. There's 12 verses total. I mentioned it in the morning session. They're prayers that are worthy of being memorized. I wouldn't be surprised if it's among the many prayers that Dravida Prabhu has memorized, because Dravida Prabhu likes to memorize sections of the Bhagavatam and other writings. At this stage, Dhruva has reached the goal, and we heard from the morning session the personality of Godhead, to show special mercy to Dhruva, appeared before him in person. Knowing the heart of Dhruva, because he's also within the heart of Dhruva, he understood his feeling, and his feeling specifically was he wanted to offer prayers, but he was immature, little boy, and didn't know how to properly express himself before the personality of Godhead. Recognizing that situation, he made it possible for him to offer suitable prayers. And he did so in his own way. And it's not like this is the only way, but it's a way that he decided, he chose to touch his conch shell. And now we're going to hear what happens after that. The power of prayers is the theme and the sub-theme, shifting the fulcrum of our consciousness. Now that fulcrum of consciousness, that's a term that I use, and I'll now illustrate graphically what I intend by that, the fulcrum of consciousness term. So there's a child's seesaw. Now there isn't someone sitting on the other side of that seesaw, and so it's down on the ground. And that soul that's sitting on the one side of the seesaw, that's us, that's a conditioned soul. And something that all conditioned souls have in common is we have a subtle mind. It carries us from one body to the next body to the next body. So in preparation for elevation of consciousness, what we heard happened with Dhruva, he already had determination and he had some faith, and that helped him fix, that was the support for his mind becoming this fulcrum, so that the next thing could happen, that is, there would be spiritual instructions. Narada gave spiritual instructions. And because his faith was firm, his determination is very strong, when the spiritual instruction came to Dhruva, his consciousness became elevated. And what happens when one's consciousness becomes elevated, one becomes decorated with nice spiritual qualities. So included in those nice spiritual qualities of Dhruva was he gave up this the get-back mentality and the hankering for something material mentality. He just became freed from all of that. Now, it doesn't describe the progressive stages of that internal letting go, but a big factor was not just the instruction, but the gratitude that he felt receiving that which he had requested of Narada, and Narada gave it very liberally, and he felt profound gratitude, and that helped him get the full advantage of the instruction, not just follow the instruction, and that was this elevated consciousness with decorated spiritual qualities. So let's go back and see it again. It's just a little graphic. I didn't do this, someone else. There's that little stick figure guy, that's us. It's a soul in a covered condition with a mind that's jibber-jabbering all kinds of things. And somehow, if we can become firm in our faith and determination to go beyond the jibber-jabber of the mind and to beyond the conditioning, that's a good beginning. It starts with a hankering for that qualification, and gradually, by various, for us, as you could say, it's coming to the stage where we follow regular principles, minimally. Spiritual instructions, feeling the force of those spiritual instructions in our life, and consciousness becomes elevated and we become decorated with spiritual qualities. So that's where this theme, leveraging the fulcrum of our consciousness, comes from. So back, Dhruva, insulted, went off to the forest to find Vishnu. Narada came to him, touched him on the head, gave nice instructions, and by the 5th month, Dhruva could stand on one leg, like a column, concentrated his mind totally on Parabrahman, captured the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart and consciousness and intelligence, and the three worlds began to tremble. The demigods went to Vishnu, who said, "I'll take care of it, don't worry." He appeared before Dhruva. He touched Dhruva with his conch shell so he could speak nice prayers. And now come the nice prayers. Prayers of Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Stuti, 12 verses, and he's going to start with, we're going to be covering 6 of the 12 this morning and the other 6 this evening. First, he's going to glorify the touch of the Lord. Remember, he was already touched by Dhruva, by Narada. So here's the verse, and those words you see highlighted in color, we'll pay special attention to them. We're going to start with this prasuptam sanjiva yati. That means that the Lord breathed life into Dhruva's senses. There's an Ayurvedic medicine some doctors prescribe called sanjivati. But, this is the Lord giving life to the senses. Pravishya, by entering into me, he touched him with his conch shell. By entering into me, you have enlivened my sleeping senses. Prasuptam sajivayati. You brought to life the power of speaking in me. I'm now your servant. And this power of speaking can now describe your form, qualities, and activities. He's honoring the gift that was given to him by the Lord's touch. There's life now in his senses, that is to say, it's as if his body was previously not alive or dead, now it's alive. Akila Shakti Dhara. Prabhupada named one of his disciples Akila Dhara. He's an interesting personality, Akila Dhara. Master of both my knowledge-acquiring senses and working senses. Akila Dhara. Akila Shakti Dhara. It's the name of Krishna. It's the way he's addressing him. Now all my senses are awake, and I want to engage them in your service. Truly, O Lord, you are Anta Yami. This is another Antaryami, name of the Supersoul. You give all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Now I have experienced this. Pranan namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. I offer my obeisances unto you, who are the supreme enjoyer. Sounds like the curtain closing. What's happening? Grinding machine, okay. Okay. As long as the sky isn't falling, I guess we're okay. Prabhupada's comments, of course, are relevant, and when he speaks, he liked this verse, and when he spoke on this verse, commonly he would refer to the Jiv Jago, Gora Chandra Bole. Lord Chaitanya is calling, wake up, sleeping soul, because his body, the body that was like dead is now alive. No. And then Prabhupada's comment is, even alive the body is dead, because it's the soul that's alive, the body is not alive. But so his body became alive by spiritual empowerment. His senses became just like a spiritual body, spiritualized by the contact with the personality of Godhead. We heard this earlier, that the iron rod in the fire becomes fire. The material body becomes spiritualized, becomes spiritual. So he's feeling that, he's realizing it, and he is expressing it. Here's Vishwanath's rendering of the verse. My dear Lord, you are all powerful. After entering within me, you have enlivened all my sleeping senses, hands, legs, ears, touch, sensation, life force, and especially the power of speech. You have made all of my senses spiritual. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you. So the touch of the Lord is the first of the 12. Then he goes directly to the Lord's supremacy, the second verse. So it's like now Sambandha Gyan in the form of prayer. He's teaching us about that which is the source of everything and the connection of everything with the source. So he's going to identify in various ways. Remember, he's a 5-year-old boy that hasn't gone to school yet, and he hasn't read Bhagavad Gita. He's just enlightened by the Lord's touch. All knowledge of the Vedas has become known to him, and he's expressing. The phrase to start with is Tvam eva Bhagavan. Ekas Tvam eva Bhagavan. You are Ekas Tvam eva Bhagavan. You are the Supreme One. And from the one comes many, because everything comes from one source. So he's realizing this fully and expressing it in these prayers. Idam Atma Shaktya. By your different energies, you appear differently in the spiritual and material worlds. He has different forms, one entity manifesting different forms by his own different energies. He's an enlightened young boy. In the material world, by your own potency, there are many other sub-controllers. But without your enabling them, they cannot do anything. So he is the Eka, and there's the Bahu, but the Bahu are depending upon the Eka and the potency of the one to empower the many. He empowers the demigods, he empowers the whatever there is where there's potency. We're going to hear shortly about one of those potencies, the potency of fire. But it's a potency of the Supreme Lord. And that as fire does things, it's the instrument of the Supreme Lord as fire doing things. And he's recognizing the connection of all things with the source of all things. It's Sambandha again. Just expressed very poetically. You create the total energy of the material world by your external potency. Now, the external energy, external potency is not created. It's eternal just as Krishna is eternal. But he manifests it, the material world, through his eternal prakriti, and maintains it and withdraws it. There's the glance of Mahavishnu over Pradhan, depicted here as Durga. And he's going to now describe the unfolding of creation. Prahlad Maharaj does something very similar. He gives this whole Purusha Sukta commentary in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. So next, being the source of the energy, he enters into it. You enter into everything, both moving and non-moving, as Paramatma. Now there's some intermediate steps, but that's okay. He's not giving the whole Srimad Bhagavatam lesson in this prayer, in these series of prayers. But he's seeing the connection of all things with the source, and then he enters into that which he is the source of, as his Paramatma feature, and uses a metaphor to explain how it happens. Just as fire entering into wood of different shapes burns brilliantly in different varieties. So I was a biochemistry major in college, so I learned some things. You can tell what an element is by the color of the flame. Blue flame, red flame, orange flame, this color flame, that color flame tells you something about the metal or the element. But although there's different varieties of color in flame, it's flame. is fire, the fire element. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is one entity. The material energy is his energy. And as wood receives fire from the source of fire, we'll say from the sun. Of course, the sun receives its fiery quality from some source, but wood receives its fiery quality from the sun, and it stores it, and it comes out in different varieties of color or shapes, even of the fire, of the flame. Can look differently besides different colors. So that variegatedness is due to the source. The potency, the potential to have variegatedness of color and shape comes from the source. And just as fire enters into wood differently, you as Paramatma, you're one Paramatma, but you enter into different living entities, and so different living entities manifest different natures and culture and languages and shapes and forms and so on, all orchestrated by the one. The diversity is resting upon the unity. So this is Vishwanath's gloss of this verse. This is the second prayer, the supremacy of the one. The senses of your devotees, by your mercy, focus on you and become spiritual, since they are completely filled with your presence. That's the previous verse. Swadhamna. Now in this verse, the senses of others, however, focus on Maya alone and become only material senses. Maya kyaya. Although it's made possible only by Supersoul, so it's the difference of material and spiritual consciousness manifests itself supported by the one in a different way. One can see the unity, one cannot. Even it's being displayed, they cannot. Diluted by the external potency. So that's the second of the 6 prayers we're going to hear this session. Now he next turns to the reciprocation that he's feeling he has received, and the nature of the Lord. So he's supreme, and he is very affectionate and friendly and kind and of a giving nature to his devotee. You give and you give and you give by your nature. This whole section is going to largely focus on the Sanskrit phrases, so I hope you don't mind that. In the beginning, so it's the unfolding of the Purusha Sukta prayers through his prayers, or commentary on them, in one sense. In the beginning you gave Brahma and the Kumaras knowledge, and thus they could see and understand the entire universe. Of course, Brahma did one thing with that knowledge, and the Kumaras did another thing, but they were able to understand because the knowledge they had received from the source. You are that source, Vishnu. Just as a person awakens from sleep and visualizes his immediate duties. Again, another metaphor, Iva. You are the only shelter of all persons who desire liberation. Now, previously we heard Narada describe one can fulfill all things, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, by worship of the personality of Godhead. So you do all of this. You fulfill the desire of liberation for those who wish it, and You're the friend of all those that are in this material situation feeling distressed. You're the real friend of both categories, the distressed materialists and the aspiring liberationists. So knowing that you are the source of all those things, how is it possible for one to neglect you? He's, in the course of this session's prayers, he's going to express with humility, I'm one of such foolish persons. I was neglecting you. How, therefore, can a learned person who has perfect knowledge ever forget you? Well, yeah, they can't. So how to get perfect knowledge so we don't forget him? Vismaryate krita vida katam. And his conclusion is only those who are ungrateful. That's not in this verse, but it's in elsewhere. Only one who is ungrateful could turn their back on Krishna. Vishwanath's gloss. Oh, my master, Lord Brahma, is fully surrendered unto you. In the beginning, you gave him knowledge, and thus he could see and understand the entire universe, just as a person awakens from sleep and visualizes his immediate duties. You are the only shelter of all persons who desire liberation, and you are the friend of all who are distressed. How, therefore, can a learned person who has perfect knowledge ever forget you? Well, then follows his humility. I'm such a foolish person, such an ungrateful person, such an unintelligent person. Feeling genuinely humble about his previous position. He's regretful, he's remorseful, although he's face to face with the Supreme Lord for his previous condition. Nice. No, it's not. He's not in the position where we are. We're regretful over our past and trying to move forward. He's already there, and he's looking back, feeling regretful. We'll see some more. Foolish persons such as me desire benedictions from you for sense gratification. Pray to God for something material. Sense gratification is available even for those who live in hellish conditions. So why approach God for objects of sense gratification or upliftment through circumstances so you can have better sense gratification? But commonly, do a little survey sometimes. I've done it several times in several different audiences in several different countries. And what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita is true. At least my little surveys have shown. For the most part, people believe that the purpose of a religious life is 1, 2, 3. In this life, gain pious merit. 2, the fruit of that pious merit is so you can prosper in this life. And 3, after this life you go to heaven, you can prosper even more. Different audiences I've asked, everyone goes, yeah, that's it. Not everyone. And if someone says something other, I have found they've read Prabhupada's books. But otherwise, they do this. And even some people that have read Prabhupada's books do this. Because they haven't read carefully. They read with filters. You know, they just hear the Sarvakama. Tivena Bhakti Yogena. So, Dhruva is saying this isn't a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of persons that don't understand what the opportunity is available to them when approaching the personality of Godhead. I'm just remembering this story I've heard many times. The bundle of lady carrying the bundle of sticks. You know the story? Ladies, and the simple lady, her means of livelihood was she would go to the forest, gather a bundle of sticks, tie up the bundle of sticks, place them on her head, and then go back to the marketplace and sell the bundle of sticks, and that was her income. So one fine day, she was carrying the bundle of sticks, and the sticks fell. So, oh, Krishna, please help me. So Krishna came. What would you like? Can you help put the bundle of sticks back on my head? He who can give anything. So to ask for some material benediction from he who can give anything, it's a sign of poor, weak intelligence. So whether this bundle of sticks fall off your head or whatever the thing is that you may be wanting is put the sticks back on my head or something that's on the material side. In his case, it was, I want a universe better than Brahma's universe. A place to rule, a kingdom more greater than Brahma. Whatever the desire is, if it's a material desire, it's a less intelligent position. It spells sense gratification. Prabhupada used in many different ways, but commonly it's the end product of fruitive activity. Because fruitive activity is to generate a means to get sense objects so you can enjoy sense objects. Economic development for sense gratification. Fruitive activity so that you're in a position to get, so dharma, artha, kama. So that he just used kama, sense gratification, commonly. He'd used it in different ways, but just enjoying the fruits of your activity. Fruitive mentality, we know from Bhagavad Gita and our practical experience, is really strong. We were speaking before about expectations. So many people have expectations about devotional service. Devotional service is supposed to make me, fill in the blank. It's about me. I'm doing this because I'll get that. Business. And if I don't get that, I don't know if I'm going to do this. You broke the contract. Krishna didn't sign a contract. In your mind, you imagined a contract. That's this image. And Dhruva is saying, this is available even in hellish conditions. Persons who worship you simply for the sense gratification of this bag of skin are certainly influenced by your illusory energy. Certainly Maya has stolen their intelligence, like me, who worshipped you for a kingdom. People worship God for different things. Then his was a kingdom. So it's not like his is bad and ours good, or ours is good and his is bad, or vice versa. It's a principle that he's speaking of. In spite of having you, who are like a desire tree, we know this kalpa taru, or kalpa briksha, we're seeing as a material kalpa briksha. Give me this, that, Om Jaya Jagadisha Hare. You who are the cause of liberation from birth and death, foolish persons such as me desire benedictions from you for sense gratification. which is available even for those who live in hellish conditions. So here's Vishwanath's gloss of the verse in his commentary. Those that worship you, giver of freedom from birth and death, for insignificant results, as if you were a material desire tree, and through a corpse-like body of human form desire happiness arising from sense objects, which is available to lower animals, are certainly cheated of their intelligence by your Maya. Maya Pratyajnana, from just expanding Bhagavad Gita's message in the form of Dhruva's prayer. The fourth type of devotee, this is the four types of pious people, the Artarthi Bhakta, is me. He is the lowest and most foolish. That's the type. Certainly, that's this nunam word at the beginning of the verse. Certainly, their intelligence has been cheated. Who are they? They worship you, who give freedom from birth and death for trifling results. Anya hetaho. Anya means other hetu, other purposes. Thus, they worship you as a desire tree. They desire happiness through a body compared to a corpse. This should not be desired. That happiness arising from relation to sense objects is available in births of pigs. Pretty strong. But Prabhupada spoke strong language also. That one of his many quoted verses. Okay, so what's the alternative? If that sense gratification available to pigs or available to those in hellish conditions, what should you pray for? Heaven? So his next is fifth prayer of the sixth that we're going to be discussing this session. Bhakti Yoga has a happiness that other forms of Vedic activity, recommended, scripturally recommended religious dharmic activity, cannot provide. Although one may be elevated to heavenly planets, he falls down in due course of time. And it's an interesting way of presenting that message. Here's the Sanskrit text 10. The bliss derived from devotional service cannot be compared to that experienced by jnanis or yogis. So he went through the karmis, the heavenly destination. Now come the jnanis and yogis, and it just leaves bhakti. My Lord, the transcendental bliss derived from meditating upon your lotus feet, tad pada padma dhyanad, or hearing about your glories from pure devotees, because those were things recommended by Narada, is so unlimited that it is far beyond the stage of Brahmananda, where one thinks himself merged in the impersonal Brahman as one with the Supreme. So now this goes to the prema stage of the sadhana bhava prema, derides even the conception of Brahman happiness. It so far surpasses. So that's the mature stage of bhakti. Since Brahmananda is also defeated, by the transcendental bliss derived from devotional service, then what to speak of the temporary blissfulness of elevating oneself to the heavenly planets, which is ended by the separating sword of time? This is still text 10. Although one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, he falls down in due course of time. Nice image, right? Feather floating through the air, and up, 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 up. Boom, 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 boom. So since Brahmananda is so much inferior, that happiness of Brahman is so much inferior to realization of loving devotional service, then what to speak of the heavenly planets? In still text 10, by the sword of time, one is cut from his exalted position within the material world, then he comes down again, just like patatam vimanat. Now, they didn't have airplanes that looked like this one, but there were vimanas, and vimanas also have to come down. But the way that Prabhupada has described it here, when the fuel runs out, it has to come back down. So as a plane goes up, it has to come down to refuel. So the vimana that carries one to the heavenly position, also it's only temporary. And we don't want temporary happiness. We want happiness that's uninterrupted happiness and ever-increasing happiness. That's what we want. Lord Brahma speaks like this in the 8th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. Nirvana Sukhara Navaya. Nirvana. The bliss of realizing the personal form of God is superior to the happiness of realizing his impersonal aspect. Now that's Prabhupada's translation. Nirvana doesn't exactly mean, normally, he's not translated as realizing the impersonal aspect. The realizing of the impersonal aspect is Brahman realization, and nirvana is just a negation of material existence, cessation of material existence, nirvana. Anyway, that's how Prabhupada translated it. The supreme, smaller than the smallest, and bigger than the biggest, anime. So that's pretty interesting. It's not just he's big or he's small, he's simultaneously both. That's inconceivable, isn't it? You can be small, but even be the smallest of the small, okay, but simultaneously the smallest of the small and the biggest of the big at the same time. That's a contradiction. It's not possible. There must be something wrong with that statement. By empiric reasoning, there's something wrong with that statement. But there's not something wrong with this statement. It's part of the glories of the Supreme who is simultaneously both. That's Vishnu. And at the same time, everything is within him. Not just the bigger than the biggest, everything is within him. The smaller than the smallest, everything is within him. Whew. That's the personality of Godhead. So Dhruva is understanding these things. So that's the end of our discussion of the first 6 of 12 verses, our prayers by Dhruva. And this material mixed devotion, where we're at the center and somehow Krishna's in the picture conveniently to get us what we want, is we need to, well, we were we're striving. Dhruva is helping us. Hearing about him is helping us get to the pure bhakti position. It's all about Krishna. So then, this isn't going to be an exercise, but just something for you to reflect. We are in this space. This liminal space means in between this and that. So that's where we are. And while we're in that place where we are, what are we doing about it? Trying to be comfortable? Maybe. But something that I've learned is in that in-between space, it's never comfortable. I just met somebody in the course of visiting here in central New Jersey, and I knew them from this place, and then I knew them from that place, and now they're in this place. And I asked them, "Are you getting settled?" And they went, "Kinda." And I said, it's uncomfortable making a transition, isn't it? And they were, yes, it's uncomfortable. So we're in this in-between space, between where it's all about us, trying to make our way towards Krishna's in the picture too, till it's only Krishna's in the picture, and we're just to be servants of Krishna. Hearing about Dhruva will help us understand the principles, and just hearing the message has its potency to carry us to that place. So continue Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, and then Vishnu Smaranam will automatically follow, or in natural sequence will follow. And Dhruva was touched by the conch shell of the Supreme Lord. Is that what's going to take for us? He's got to appear before us and touch us with his conch shell, and then we'll be okay. But that being in senses enlivened from the dead to now alive position, spiritually alive position, is there opportunity for something like that to happen with us? And the answer is yes, through the bhakti process. Our senses can also become spiritualized, like the iron rod in the fire becomes fire. Another very simple example is electricity. A copper wire isn't electric, but you connect it with electricity and it conducts electricity. It becomes electric. It acts like electricity, although it's just a copper wire. It carries. So we can also become the carrier or the instrument of Krishna's empowerment, and we can feel it. It's available to feel that connectivity. We had a little exercise where you felt unconditional acceptance by Krishna despite your deficiencies. And we all have that experience, otherwise how can we go on, because we're very deficient. Unless we're really a fool and think we're not. We're deficient. But something's carrying us on. So that reciprocation, moving from where we are to where we want to go, and feeling, little by little at least, we're making progress. And we continue and continue and continue. That's the advice that this teaching of Dhruva is presenting to us. We just abide by the instruction carefully, how to get to the goal. Being confident the goal recognizes that effort that we're making, and there's reciprocation. However Krishna wants to reciprocate, it's up to him. Okay, so that covers this session's topic. We finished early. That's good. Can we turn the light on? Can we turn this thing on? I can't see you when this thing is on, but then now I can see you. Any discussion?
In the morning class, you were talking about Brahma Maya that Dhruva Maharaj was experiencing. And I was thinking about this Bhagavad Gita verse 6.28, which talks about Brahma Samsparshaja. Are they both same, or like is there some difference between the two?
Brahma Samsparshada?
Yeah.
Brahma Samsparshada. Do you have a Bhagavad Gita? Can you get me a Bhagavad Gita? On the bookshelf back there.
The verse says...
While we're waiting, let me just... This is commentary. And it's in this case, Brahma Maya means potency. Brahma Maya, potency of Brahman. So Dhruva felt illumined by that potency of Brahman, thus his knowledge awakened. So that's the Brahma Maya. And this is 628?
Yes.
Brahma Samsparsham, being in constant touch with the Supreme. Thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service. Purport. Self-realization means knowing one's constitutional position in relation to the Supreme. The individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme, and his position is to render transcendental service to the Lord. This transcendental contact with the Supreme is called Brahma Samsparsha. Well, they're certainly close, but they're not identical. This samsparsha means contact with, like yehi samsparsha ja bhoga dukkha yona yevi. When the senses contact sense objects, that's just samsparsha. So Brahma samsparsha is contact with the Supreme Lord. That's what it means. And Brahma Maya is the potency of transcendence, the sat feature of the Supreme Lord, the potency of spirit. So they're certainly similar, they're not identical. That's why there's two different terms instead of one term. Like brother and sister, how's that?
Okay. My second question is, similar to Dhruva Maharaj, Narada also saw the Lord. And like it was mentioned, Dhruva Maharaj, it was the special mercy of the Lord that Lord showed himself to Dhruva Maharaj.
Yes.
And in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, similarly it is described that it was the mercy of the Lord that Lord appeared to Narada Muni.
Yes.
But then there is, in Chapter 5 of Canto 1, it says that Narada Muni was not qualified, and the Lord appeared to him to encourage him to continue his process of purification.
Correct.
But here, my question is Dhruva Maharaj completely pure when the Lord appeared to him?
Yes.
Okay.
In comparison to Narada when he was a little boy. Because Narada, when he was a little boy, in his previous life, a little boy, he was just beginning. And although here's Dhruva, a little boy, when the Lord appeared, he wasn't just beginning. He was already purified. He was already seeing the Lord constantly within his heart. Constantly. he had already become as heavy as the Supreme Lord, and the earth was being... So his stage was matured, and Narada in his previous life was not yet matured.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And the ladies' side up here, too.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Maharaj. I think I have the similar question like Mataji. So Dhruva Maharaj had the same spiritual master, Narada Muni, and he is the spiritual master for so many people.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is that special quality in Dhruva Maharaj that he was able to reach or capture the God just in 4 or 5 months? He did not have any past, means as of our knowledge, he did not have anything, but it's only through
Your question is, what is the special qualification of Dhruva Maharaj that enabled him to realize the Supreme Lord in 6 months?
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
your question.
Yes.
Well, he had he got a lot of mercy, and he had a lot of determination. He was capable of austerities. I mean, what Narada said to discourage him is many great personalities for lifetimes, they undergo severe austerities. And he underwent severe austerities. But, others had undergone severe austerities. But, little boy, anybody that knows little boys, I'm hungry. Anyway, but he just went beyond his little boy body consciousness. He was very determined. Now, the source of that determination wasn't good. But he was very determined. And the object was Vishnu, so he got closer and closer and closer. So it was his determination and the mercy of his mother and Narada, and the sense of gratitude that he had, which was profound.
Because as we read, he did not have no knowledge, no Vedic knowledge or anything. So from his past life.
Well, he hadn't studied in school yet, but his grandfather is Swayambhuva Manu, and his great grandfather is Brahma, and he knows them. So he probably received some knowledge, but hadn't done studies yet. Like us, we know some things, but we don't really haven't deeply gone into the subject matter and carefully studied. He hadn't done that. Behind you.
Maharaj, this is a question from yesterday's class on discussion about karma and taking responsibility.
Discussion about?
Karma, one's own karma and taking responsibility. So the question is, like in situation of Dhruva Maharaj, suppose his stepmother had not behaved the way she behaved. So is it fair to know or fair to understand that karma would have come in another shape? He was due, not Dhruva, but okay, if I have to put that in my life.
Well, not necessarily like that, but something.
Something, yeah.
Opportunity for purification comes in different shapes and sizes and forms and looks. So supposing we have this unpleasant experience over here. I know people, they have a job and gosh, these people in this place of work, they're really grumpy and I'm out of here. They go to another place. Now, sometimes they're nice. But generally speaking, like your question, somewhere along the line, somehow or another, someone's going to be grumpy, and you take your karma and your mind with you when you go to the next place. You change the circumstance, and it takes some time, but the prompt to help you go beyond your stuff is provided. The configuration of matter is arranged to help us get beyond our stuff, our contamination. Or just get triggered by it and do some more. So yes, but it's not exactly a one-to-one. It's going to look like this or feel like that.
So then it needs like a discernment to understand if if I need to move out of that, say, work situation or a team or a project, and or just stick there and try to receive the opportunities for purification.
It depends. I mean, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about your neighbor. And the dynamic that goes on with your neighbor. They bought their house, you bought your house, and you could sell the house and go somewhere else. Then you have, that's an option. Then you have some other options. So you think of what the options are. One is what you mentioned. Just grit your teeth and bear it. And then there's other options, and you consider what's sensible given everything, all the variables. We have choices. Even you got, a certain kind of a neighbor.
Now, just a slightly different question. If somebody is abused, so, there's a book, My Karma, My Fault, and kids are, or some other person is really, this principle is used in a very terrible way, that it's their karma,
Okay, let's not go there.
So what is the counseling or something that, like this concept should be removed from the mind completely and help a person?
Well, you can't just remove it completely, but if that's the only crutch you lean on, it's a rubber crutch. The victim becomes the perpetrator is common. It's just, human nature, conditioned human nature. So there are other factors, and I think the answer to this question, you need to go to somebody that's a gifted counselor. What are some other things to say when this situation happens? I wouldn't recommend going there. It's not a 0, but you don't make it a 10 and nothing else. It's not advisable. It's not empathy. So I would say speak to somebody that's a professional in this field, particularly a devotee professional in this field, and a couple of them, and you ask the question of that person. But it's not a 0. It's horrible. That's what it is, horrible. By laws of karma, severely punishable. So, anyone else? Oh, way over there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for a wonderful lecture on it and taking us into the Dhruva Maharaj's mind and teaching us how to be moving ahead in the first step to the devotional service on it. Thank you. So my question is about the Dhruva Maharaj's determination, you said, right? And is it the determination was about his free will, or the determination is like, as you also coined the word antaryami, right? It's and he is the absolute truth, and he's there inside of everyone on it, who controls everything on it. That determination of Dhruva Maharaj which came out, was his free will, or it is to show the world that this is how you can achieve me in reality on it with hard work?
That's a tough question. Well, it's not one or the other. You know, man proposes and, not or. God disposes. In other words, it's the combination of the two. So, is it that Vishnu wanted us to understand how to achieve perfection, and he simply used Dhruva as an instrument, and that's all that we need to know? That would seem to imply, unless you're chosen one, you're not going to be determined. Unless Vishnu wants to use you as a role model to teach others how to be determined. You're not going to be able to be determined. Now, his determination level was exceptional, super exceptional. It's stated in so many ways. Not just for a small boy, just for an embodied being. That determination is exceptional. What to speak of for a small boy. But combination, that would be my answer, not either or.
Thank you. Thank you, Maharaj. Another small question.
So let's just say, three people that like kirtan, or they like cooking, or they like book distribution, or they like something in devotional service. One is like naturally gifted, singer, book distributor, cook, just like gifted. And then there's another person that they really can't carry a tune. I know some people like that. But, and they seem to sing the loudest too. So is that person possibly trainable? Well, it depends upon their determination, or depends upon the mercy of the Lord to say you can go from a frog to a cuckoo bird. They just wanted to show that that's possible by mercy. So by Prabhupada's teaching is by practice, so that takes some determination to practice consistently over time. Then Mission Impossible becomes possible. So there has to be some determination for the person that can't sing nicely to sing nicely. But if the person who already sings nicely becomes an empowered singer, not just one who sings elegantly, but bhakti isn't there, so it takes both to be what Dhruva became. And for us, it may take some practice and practice and practice to become more determined. And we're going to be depending upon the mercy of Krishna to help our determination have a breakthrough and feel Krishna's presence. Like, remember that image? I don't know if you were here. A little boy trying to lift a giant barbell. Is determination alone going to do it? Not very likely. It's a combination. Especially something that's really special and exceptional. Okay? You have something further? You had something further, didn't you?
Maharaj, you also coined a word called prosecution of devotional service. What is that? I didn't get that.
What's the phrase again?
Prosecution of devotional service.
Proper system?
Prosecution of devotional service.
Prosecution of devotional service. Practice of devotional service. That's prosecution. You know, it's not yet a legal term. Practice.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Much about practical aspect, I wanted to get advice on practical aspect, especially the second question. What are our opportunities to become touched by Lord? By Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we get a lot of opportunities to get in contact with devotees and association. But then, what are the main principles we should follow? Because many times, what happens, most of us are grahasthas. So there are opportunities out also in material world for our career or education. Then many times that conflict is there. So what are the main principles we should keep in mind so we can take a right decision?
For advancement of career?
In advancement of taking the opportunities to get touched by Lord.
When you brought this up, my mind got stuck.
Okay.
And it got stuck on, I was busy preparing for our yatra in South India, the Aranyakanda visit. By popular request, we visited Pandharpur. And devotees that went to see Lord Vittal, one of their highlights was placing their head on the feet of Lord Vittal. Have you been there?
Yes.
Were you able to do?
Yes.
So, gosh, let's go. There's an opportunity. I was busy, with Ramayana. I didn't go. Maybe I'll have to make another visit sometime. But there are and here's another example. Devotees from South India that wanted to have darshan of Balaji. How long do you have to stand in line? And then how long can you stand in front of Balaji? But persons who have been to see Balaji say, in Iskcon you could... Is that mercy or is that mercy or is that mercy? We don't maybe recognize it because it's so accessible to us.
Yes.
But the Lord is giving His mercy. No, He's at a distance. We're not putting our head on His feet for different reasons. But to be responsive to your question, as a grahastha, make lists of where we are already receiving mercy and enter into those opportunities that we're already receiving mercy in a gratitude mood. So that the gratitude mood means the heart is now open and I'm receiving more of the fullness of the mercy that's being made available to me abundantly. And, for me, one of them is Srimad Bhagavatam. And, it really hit me like a thunderbolt when I read that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was in his mid-30s before he even had a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam. Because there was no printing presses in his youth. Later they became available, etc., printing presses. And for us, it's so simple. You have people knocking on your door. Please take one. Or, Krishna.com, click, Srimad Bhagavatam, click, credit card information, click, and it just appears at your door. Because it's so accessible, maybe you don't recognize what that mercy is. And so forth. So by taking stock of, as Grahasta, taking stock of what are the forms of mercy that are already there, we don't have to go to Pandharpur and place our head. We can just hold the Srimad Bhagavatam to our head, or the holy name, or our mantra beads, or the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada and his Vyasa-san. It's available. We're not restricted because of our ashram. Now, some devotees, I'm sure you're aware, you may know of some, I know some, they're in remote places. And look at us, look at how much abundant association of devotees we have. So, our blessings are abundant. And so just acknowledge them with a grateful heart. That's my thought on. You want to add something to it?
No, Maharaj, thank you very much. And just want to clarify, the Pandharpur, putting my head in Vithal's lotus feet, not this time when the group went, but few years back, my mother took me there. I didn't realize that time how important it is, but now at this moment I'm realizing that. Thank you very much.
You're fortunate you have a devotee mother.
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Question over here? Put your hand up.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I have 2 points in my mind. One is related to King Uttanapada. We talked that he was from such an elevated lineage, and he had Hridaya Durbalyam, weakness of heart. So even being in such a background, he had that issue, what to talk of us. So how can we overcome that? And I think this has already been discussed, but I'm not remembering the answer. Maybe an Anarth Nivritti seminar or somewhere.
Shravanam Kirtanam and Sadhu Sangha, that's the main. And, our commitment. I recognize I have this vulnerability and I need to make a commitment that's stronger than I've been making so that I won't succumb to this. Those are 3.
So just follow the process.
That's the Shravanam Kirtanam.
Okay. And the second point is, as I was talking to Paramrupa Prabhu and I read the purport for verse 54, where Narad Muni gives the mantra, and he talks about meditating on the form of the Lord. In the purport, Prabhupada says that one must have the deity of the Lord and then chant. Now I'm remembering from one of our previous seminar where I think we talked about Harinam Chintamani. I think there it is mentioned that one should only hear about the Lord's name, and even looking at the form of the Lord as a preliminary stage, which we require at this time, but that should not be the focus. So.
Yes.
And Prabhupada here is saying that one must have the deity form. Okay.
You're a very careful reader. I compliment you. Let me ask you, which one do you prefer?
At this stage, definitely with the deity form of the Lord, I cannot focus much on the holy name.
Between this and that sound contradictory, and, on the face they're contradictory. It's either this or that, it can't be both, so it's contradictory. The principle, the important principle is the sound of the name. So if it helps you to absorb your mind in hearing the sound of the name, do this or do that or do the other thing. The important is hearing the sound of the name. So this is my experience and advice. When you look at when you hear from scripture or acharyas or sources, there's this and there's that, and they're not the same. Empirically, they're not the same. What do? Look at the big picture. And what's the big picture? And there's this, the preponderance of evidence is over here. And there may be something that's over there. So it doesn't mean that the something over there has to be wrong because the preponderance is over here. But you take the big picture, make sure that you are looking at this and that through the lens of the big picture. And then, so it's not like this one has to be wrong if this one's right, and this one, this one has to be wrong if that one's right. So which one? Because that's kind of where the binary way that questions like that come from. Now, if they're both right, although I don't have the capacity to understand, because it sure looks like they can't both be right, what's the big picture? The big picture is the mind should be focused on the personality of Godhead. So that would, and the primary means for us is sound, Shravanam. So whatever enhances the Shravanam, do that, because that's the essence. That's what's going to get us to where we want to go.
Okay.
So if that helps you more than focusing on this, make sure it's not going to compromise your hearing. Because part of what happens when focus goes to the form instead of to the name, it stays away from the name. And then it goes to some other form and some other, it gets, the distraction of the mind is more likely. And I'm not getting the fullness of the mercy of the primary thing. So make sure the primary thing remains in the primary position. However, whatever works.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for reading that detail. I thought you would do it. I wouldn't have to even look. Because you're a careful reader, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. All glories to God.
Meticulous reader. Someone else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So just repeating the question from yesterday I had for you.
Yesterday evening.
Yes.
Is Atulya here? Okay, pay attention. It's just in relation to what you said and I said in response to what you said.
So restating my question. So anyway, first of all, thank you very much for the nice classes and all the different things you shared about Dhruva Maharaj's story pertinent to us about how we go ahead with.
Keep it short, please. Let's get right to the top of the question.
Yeah. So the acceptance and no fault finding are the things that I mainly took home. Keeping that in mind, my learning is that I consider myself as not having too much of thinking about matters non-related to Krishna's service, but it is more like considering more on the subtle platform. Right? That's how I can consider myself following these principles of acceptance and no fault finding. So now, Maharaj, my question is, when you answered Atulya Mataji's question, there is a certain, I think, a level at which we should consider our existence, our identity.
Yes.
So where do we draw that? I mean, how do we recognize that line, wherein we come into the picture as having, as um, uh, considering, okay, this is how I feel or I, think. Because normally that is kind of normal, but when we considering Krishna's service, it is more like we don't want to debate on things, but just, dovetail things to, how to manage to transform them into Krishna's service.
This is really subtle. And it's a little complicated. So what I thought you were asking yesterday, I don't know if I'm going to be able to satisfy your question because I'm not really clear what your question is. But what I understood from yesterday is, Atulya, can you repeat what you understood in my response to your question yesterday, right now? Do you remember the question?
So her question was, when others are having expectations about me, then how do I respond to that?
When others have expectations of me, and I'm not meeting their expectation, how should I think about that? So, yeah, something that I shared with you, which I wanted to add to my response from yesterday evening, is it may very well be, I have often had the experience that I had no idea that someone was expecting X, Y, Z until I found out, generally it's not even from them, they said to person B, I'm frustrated because he didn't meet my expectation. And I didn't even know they had the expectation. So it helps to have relationships where you're not just in your mind projecting an expectation. I mean, so without giving examples, I can think of several. If I know that somebody has an expectation, it's not like, hey, I'm me. Don't project your expectations on me because I'm me. It may very well be part of what's important to me is I'd like to know what it is that you would like from me, and then I can try to process that. Just, is that realistic? And I'm happy to have a relationship where there's a need, and you're being clear what your need is, and we work together to see how that need can be addressed, as long as I know what the need is. But an unspoken need that being projected that I don't pick up on the subtle wavelength. So there's relationships. So much depends on the relationship, you and the other person, and so forth, time, place, circumstance in that relationship. And how, in response to Atulya's question, how you respond when you come to know that you're not meeting someone's expectation and they're feeling frustrated with you. So much depends upon the time, place, circumstance, and the relationship. Like, there are times, this is me, there are times when I'm like overwhelmed with like this preparation for the yatra. I was, 15 to 17 hours a day preparing for this yatra. I didn't have time to look left, sideways, nothing. And people wanted time, and I just didn't have time. And I wasn't meeting their expectation, and I knew it. I had the person who was assisting me say, "Please be very polite, but let them know later, please. I don't have time right now. It's just not, I'll burst." So that was, but that, sometimes you just have to live with the fact that we're not, but then, in an appropriate time, can we speak about this urgent thing. A little later, please? I understand it's urgent. Can we speak about it a little later, please? So, it depends. Time, place, circumstance. How you respond to coming to know you're not meeting someone's expectations. You, them, time, circumstance, situation, long-term, short-term. Can I do something to invest in that relation that's not necessarily the full thing, so to show them I care about the person, but it's not, this isn't a realistic so it's so variegated. It depends on time, place, circumstance. Now, that's responding more completely to what Atulya, what I understood you bringing up yesterday, but I'm not really sure what you're asking today. Did I touch on it or no? Yeah, I can guess the answer is going to be no. A polite, not really, Maharaj. Could we discuss this offline? That might make it easier.
I'm good, Maharaj.
Because it's a little delicate and subtle, and I'm not sure if that's something everyone needs to go through.
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Dvaita Chandra's got his hand up. Can we have somebody take the microphone over there?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm not sure if this is a reasonable observation, but when I look at the lives and incidents of devotees described in Srimad Bhagavatam versus, say, in Ramayana or Mahabharata, seems like advancement in spiritual life is a lot more dependent on individual effort in Srimad Bhagavatam versus collective effort in Ramayana and Mahabharata, which seems more relatable to me given our situation as a society today. Like, for me to progress in Krishna consciousness, it's not... Are you okay? Yeah.
Just leave it. Just leave it. Just leave it. Go ahead. Keep going.
So for one to
Nothing
progress in Krishna consciousness, it's not just enough for someone to just apply the teachings on their own. You have to work within a network of relationships, larger society, to progress. But the Srimad Bhagavatam examples seem a lot more dependent on individual effort, or at least minimal relationships. It's usually just the student and the spiritual master, not so much collective network, if that makes sense. Am I making sense?
My college mind is going to, yeah, but I can think of lots of situations that are collective in Mahabharata and Ramayana that are not just teacher to student.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It seems those two scriptures seem to have more examples of collective effort versus Srimad Bhagavatam. Is that a fair observation? And is there something behind that we should be...
I'd like to think about it before commenting.
Okay.
Interesting.
Thank you.
My brain works really slow. Some people, mine doesn't do that. I have to think about it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes. One more and we'll end.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, is there any description of what it feels like when the Lord touches our head?
What it
feels like?
What it feels like? What it feels like when what?
When the Lord touches devotee's head.
When the Lord accepts the devotee?
Touches the devotee.
Touches. we hear in the prayer of Prahlad what external manifestation and the feelings of ecstasy. We hear what happened with Dhruva. It wasn't his hand, it was his conch. So just go there and read those two sections. Ram embraced Hanuman, that's in Ramayana. You can read that section. So just go and do your homework.
Yes,
Then
Maharaj.
you'll find the answer to your question. Srila Prabhupada ki